Hey, it's April Bowden here, back with another video. You can find me at Truth or Talk and at Aiden's Road to Recovery. So those of you who have been following my work at Aiden's Recovery or following Verstine and I at Truth or Talk know that we've done extensive research into natural health. We've done extensive research into vaccines and healing from vaccine injury, etc., etc. So that's kind of been our primary core focus, though we have covered other issues and we are not opposed to covering just about anything. So, but one thing that I haven't done as much writing about or talking about is some of the research that I've been doing over the last 4 years or so in personality disorders. I did an article called The Vaccine Industry is a Malignant Narcissist, and what I was my hypothesis, or what I was putting forward into the public, is that basically these facets of the medical industrial complex and other areas of these authoritarian organizations act very Machiavellian, which Machiavellian means the ends justify the means. And they have this attitude of a narcissist. They act very self-entitled. They treat others, poorly, and give false promises. So that's very much, like a narcissist. So I wanted to, though, but narcissism is one of these words that's become a cliche. It's become one of these things that people throw out in order to attack somebody, give them an ad hominem attack, and be dismissive and to write them off, like calling somebody crazy or calling somebody stupid. It's one of these thought-terminating cliches. And for example, we've seen a lot of people calling Donald Trump a narcissist. Now, I'm not a person of politics. I don't vote. It's just how I roll, right? I just don't believe in the system at all. So, I don't participate in it as much as possible. So, I'm not trying to defend him, and I can't prove that he's not a narcissist because that would be proving a negative. But I can say that people saying it are doing so based on this idea that he has a lot of confidence and that he goes and he's very boastful and he's grandiose. And that's kind of the idea of what a narcissist is by most people. But it's actually a very serious personality disorder. And there's a lot more to it. And we don't know enough about him in order to say that that's what he is. And so I'm going to go over the DSM listing. And then, I'm not a big fan of the DSM or the diagnostic. It's called, the DSM is an acronym for the Diagnostic Statistics and Manual. And this was provided by the Mayo Clinic. So I'm not a fan of the Mayo Clinic. I'm not a fan of the DSM. But I will, for the sake of trying to kind of give you an idea of this is what mainstream psychology says, and then this is what my research and my personal experience have shown. So I'll try to insert that in. So I'm going to go through these one by one. Having an exaggerated sense of self-importance, have a sense of entitlement, and require constant excessive admiration. Again, this exaggerated sense of self-importance, this grandiose kind of attitude is what mostly people kind of recognize as being a narcissist. And, we can look at another celebrity example, would be Muhammad Ali. And then Muhammad Ali would go around saying he was the greatest, and he was the champion of the world at one point, so he was the greatest. That was a valid argument. But, it was more along, would he be classified as a narcissist? I would say probably not, highly unlikely, because he also was a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War and had to serve prison time. And I believe he lost his title because of that. So that would be a very selfless act, and narcissists don't really roll like that. So you can see where, one narcissistic trait, being egotistical and grandiose and all that, it does not qualify one as a narcissist. Now let's continue. Expect to be recognized as superior even without achievements that warrant it. In both those examples, they did kind of achieve a lot. Muhammad Ali and Donald Trump have achieved a lot, so I wouldn't say it was without warrant. Exaggerated achievements and talents, maybe, in those cases. But again, people that do that and kind of exaggerate their achievements and talents could be that could be considered a narcissistic trait, but it does not, in and of itself, it does not make one a narcissist. So, so far, these are things that aren't unique to narcissist. Preoccupied with fantasies about success, power, brilliance, beauty, or the perfect mate. Yes, they do have magical thinking, but a lot of people do that aren't narcissist. So again, not super unique to narcissist just yet. So let's keep going. Believe they are superior and can only associate with equally special people. They do believe they're superior, but I don't think that they really regard people as equal. So having to associate with equally special people, I mean, I've yet to meet a narcissist who kind of knows that there is somebody out there that's their equal. If they do regard someone as their equal, or even as better than them in some way, it's generally a short-lived kind of thing in order to garner supply from that person. So they're putting on an act. So I don't really know what to think about that one. They do, and then in some cases, a narcissist, will associate with people that they find to be inferior simply because they are in constant need of attention. So they may actually associate with people that they, don't think are smart, that think are very below them, just to get it, just because they can't stand to be alone. So I don't really agree with that one. Let's see, monopolize conversations and battle or look down on people they perceive as inferior. Again, they kind of think everybody's inferior. So they sort of look down on everybody. A narcissist has an attitude of it's the world against them. And they, despite the fact that, because it's a delusional disorder, they do have delusional thinking, they will think that even if everybody kind of agrees that they're the problem, they still think that everybody else is the problem. They feel like, and they'll have a million reasons and excuses as to why that is. It's really bizarre how well they can come up with excuses, So, yeah, they do monopolize conversations, and they do they can be very belittling and rude. But not always. Sometimes they're extraordinarily charming. So that's something. And then again, that's not something that's necessarily unique to narcissists, because they don't because some people can act that way and then just be kind of immature. Because narcissism is really, narcissists are very emotionally immature people, but not all emotionally immature people are narcissists. So it could be something that you see in someone, but you can't label them just yet. You got to kind of reserve that until you get to some other stuff. Expect special favors and unquestioning compliance with their expectations. Yeah, absolutely. This is going along with that sense of entitlement. And the sense of entitlement is really the biggie, because narcissists, because they feel entitled to whatever it is that they want, this is what creates this mischievous behavior. So that sense of entitlement, so in other words, if the narcissist finds himself or herself attracted to their best friend's spouse, they feel it's okay to act inappropriately with them, to flirt with them, to say things, or to have sex with them and actually have an affair. Because they just think, well, their attitude, their way of thinking is kind of like, I guess, I don't want to lose my friend. It's all about them, right? So it's not going to be, this is wrong. It's going to be like, if I get caught, I could lose my friend. That's the thought process. That would be the only thing that would stop them, because the friend would be giving them enough supply and enough attention that they would think, well, that's a good source of supply. I don't want to lose it. But I really feel, but I want this person. I want, my best friend's wife. I want my best friend's husband. So therefore, I'm just going to do it because, what else am I supposed to do? They kind of look at it like that. Well, what am I supposed to do? I want this, so therefore I'm entitled to have it. That's their process, no joke. So the sense of entitlement thing is huge. And I mean, this could also be applied to like the workplace. You know, they'll stab people in the back. They don't care about what they do as far as like, I mean, if you've seen those films on Stephen Jobs and Bill Gates and then the Zuckerberg guy who invented Facebook, it's like all the same. These guys, they take advantage of their friends. You know, in the case of Stephen Jobs, I mean, he didn't even create the product, but yet he took full credit for it, didn't he? I mean, and he didn't think anything of it, you know, because they just feel entitled. And see, this is where some of this behavior actually like crosses over into sociopathy. And that's where there's comorbidity. And sociopaths are not exactly the same as narcissists, but they can have like overlap, if that makes sense. So someone can be a narcissistic sociopath or a sociopathic narcissist. Now, a really good example of that would be Lance Armstrong. Now, I say we know enough about him to say that he is most likely a narcissist. Now, how do we classify that? Well, because he just went on winning Tour de France after Tour de France after Tour de France, right? What did he win, like 9 of them? And so he felt entitled to win. So he thought it was okay that the rules didn't apply to him. So even though there's rules against people taking performance-enhancing drugs, and it's not that he's a rebel-rouser and that these rules are unfair. No, the rules are there so that one person doesn't have an unfair advantage over the other, right? So then his attitude would be something like, well, everybody else was doing it, so I'm going to do it too. And that, I believe he actually said that. And that's a very typical response of a narcissist because, for one, everybody has a subjective mind. So everybody's going to think that, you know, most people are kind of like me. So if you're an honest person, for the most part, and you're going to think most everybody is honest and good. But if you're an evil person that's a liar and deceitful, then you're going to think everybody else is too. So Lance Armstrong makes that argument. It's a logical fallacy, of course, and he makes the argument that everybody else is doing it too. He can't possibly know that. Were some other people doing it? Sure, yeah, I would say that would be a fair argument. Some other people were probably doing it. So, but that doesn't give him the right to then do it and then go on to just keep winning as if he has, you know, like the right to just keep winning over everybody else. And so it's not fair to the people that actually didn't use those types of performance-enhancing drugs. Now, I'm not trying to take it away from him that he's a fantastic cyclist, because if I took 1 million performance-enhancing drugs, I'm not going to win the Tour de France. You know what I'm saying? You have to train, and you have to be good, even if you are on these drugs. There's no doubt about that. But we'll never know, really, if he was the best, because he had an advantage. And also, I mean, and not only that, but he knew what he was doing was wrong because he had to lie, he had to bribe, he had to, you know, bully all these people in order to keep it a secret, right? So he knew what he was doing was wrong. And then his first wife asked him, you know, kind of just came to him with concern, not with a judgmental attitude, not with the attitude of, you know, you're doing something bad, but just with, you know, hey, honey, like you know, this is kind of risky behavior. And therefore, we could get caught, we could lose everything. You could hurt yourself by doing this. So maybe you should consider, you know, stopping it. Well, so his response to that was to immediately divorce her and discard her. And that's how narcissists roll. So once you have questioned their facade, see, they live and die by this fraudulent, this fake facade, right? So because it wasn't as important that he was the best as that he made everybody think he was the best. That's what he needed, right? And again, not extraordinarily grandiose, right? Lance Armstrong was kind of humble. I mean, he never came out like, I'm the greatest and doing the things like Muhammad Ali or something. You know, he didn't act like that. So you can see where it's not necessarily that in and of itself, that attitude is not indicative, because Lance Armstrong, full-blown narcissist, all which way and about, and carrying over into sociopathy in the way that he engages in such risky, high-risk behavior. and the way that he, did things that were unlawful and broke the law. So, but definitely a narcissist, because he also had that unquenchable need to be the best, to have everybody think he was the best anyway, and to get the constant attention. So he divorces his wife, he discards her, because that's what they do as soon as you question. So just questioning it from a place of love and concern is enough for him to look at her as a betrayer. Because now it's not even just that she would expose him. It wasn't even the risk of exposure to the world. It was the fact that she could see through him. So that's enough in the mind of a narcissist. The fact that you can see the real me. You can see the monster underneath the mask. That makes me threatened. Because now she's no longer a good source of supply to him. So the wife is the best source of supply. That's your intimate primary partner. For a narcissist, that's their number one go-to source of narcissistic supply. And so when she questions his mask, that's it. And especially with a narcissist, they can't be alone. So they have to constantly have a partner, somebody, giving them, they really are not capable of being on their own. And for very long, they get very, very depressed if they are. So you can take this to the bank for sure that he had another person on the hook before he discarded the wife. And so, he can just replace her like that, because people are interchangeable. You're not a human, and that is, without the other person, just holding up that mask, you're not, you will cease to exist as the person that, doesn't matter how much love you've provided, doesn't how much, she wiped his ass, she took care of him when he was sick, bore his children, none of that stuff. You are now a betrayer in the mind of the narcissist. No joke. So this is serious, right? So that's the real deal of a narcissist. So let's go on to take advantage of others to get what they want, right? Just exactly what he did. Have an inability or unwillingness to recognize the needs and feelings of others. Now, this is another really big one. This is really important. They have little to no empathy. Now, empathy is where we can feel the emotions of other people. And we're not born with this feeling. So again, this is an emotional maturity thing that you develop over time. So around our teen years, we start to develop empathy. We start to see other people as separate entities. They're not just an extension of us. They aren't just there to fulfill our needs. And so once we recognize them in that way, we can feel their happiness and their pain. Once we have that ability to do that. Well, narcissists do not. They do not develop this. And if they do, it's very little. It's very low. Because what I've seen of narcissists is that they can have empathy, but only for themselves. In other words, like if you're in a relationship with a narcissist and you say you're going to leave, they aren't crying. They might cry and beg and plead because they're dependent on your source of supply. So they're crying for themselves. They're not going to cry because they hurt you. If you tell them that they hurt you and they get upset, it's only because they think they have this overwhelming fear of abandonment because they can't live on their own. So therefore, they're going to look at that as, oh shit, I'm going to lose this source of supply. What am I going to do? So they're crying for themselves. The empathy that they feel is just for themselves, really. And so without empathy, without feeling other people's emotions and other people's pain, you can go around just hurting people and not giving a shit because you don't feel their pain. Why would you care if you don't think that you don't even acknowledge that you've caused it? So they don't even see, because they carry this mask, right? Most of the time they see themselves as a good person, even though they're wreaking havoc and just destroying lives and making people feel miserable. And they have these, slew of, people that they've had fallouts with and all this kinds of stuff, and yet they don't recognize that it has anything to do with them. They always think it's the other person. So they like to paint themselves as the victim. It's one of the things that, one of the manipulation tactics that they use. So the empathy thing is big. that is where the Mayo Clinic is actually accurate. Being envious of others and believing others envy them. They're very envious people. Very, very envious. And yes, they think others envy them too. And this is where they have a very paranoid mind as well. Because, again, you know, the way people think subjectively, because they're deceiving and dirty and lying, you know, they think that everybody else is too. And so they also are very envious of other people, so, and believe that others envy them, so they have difficulty trusting. Behaving arrogantly in a haughty manner, coming across as conceited, boastful, and pretentious. Not always unique to narcissists, but they do act that way. Insist on having the best of everything, for instance, the best car or office. Yeah, I mean, because they have that sense of entitlement, they're not afraid to ask for that kind of shit, you know? It really depends on the kind of narcissist that they are, because some narcissists are playing like they're good Samaritans, so they might actually act like they don't care about that kind of stuff, you know, because they're looking for a different source kind of supply. It's not really about like the material thing. It might be about other, you know, garnering attention from people. And this is where I would like to point out what the DSM is actually really, really missing, and that is addiction. Narcissism is actually rooted in addiction. So when narcissists don't need constant praise and adulation and admiration, they like it, but they actually just need constant attention. So it could be negative attention. As long as they're receiving input from others, they are able to maintain their facade. They're able to maintain that thing that makes them a narcissist, that fake persona. So it's rooted in addiction, literally, in the sense that when they're eliciting a response from somebody else, be it an admiration or you know, even an argument, they're getting dopamine into their brain. So they're getting stoned, like no joke. And that part of that... Sorry, I had to pause for a second because my son just entered the room. So anyway, so the addiction component is a really big part of the narcissism, because this is, again, why because people are their drug of choice. People's emotions are their drug of choice. This is why it's so easy for them to discard one person and then just replace them with another. Because just like with a drug, I mean, if you were taking it for a long period of time, eventually your tolerance would begin to wane. And so you would need to get a more potent drug, right? And so for the narcissist, you know, somebody that's new and novel, even is very much their new drug. You know, and so they'll just toss somebody else. And, you know, so you'll see a lot of times in narcissistic relationships that a narcissist might have a partner who seems, you know, really high quality, somebody that's, you know, smart and bright and good looking. And then just suddenly they break it off with that person. And then they start up with somebody who you would perceive as not being of their standards. You know, it's kind of like they can just change over. And this is usually because, like in the case with Lance Armstrong, something like that has occurred where the person who's in the relationship with them is starting to question the facade. And so then they start to panic, and they need to quickly, you know, then that person is no longer a good source of supply to them. It's like the well has been poisoned, and now they can't go back to it. You know, they can't, because now they know that you see them for who they really are. And so, you know, that source of supply that they get from you is like, but, you know, and so they're going to look for something else really, really fast, and usually already have something else. They almost always are cheaters, if not full-blown, like having sex with somebody else, then having somebody kind of like waiting in the wing, you know, somebody that they are flirting with or that they're interested in or whatever, you know. It's always like that with the narcissist, almost always. They can't just be with one person for very long because they just don't get high enough. You know, they're looking for more to get stoned. And because that's, you know, so addiction is a really big part of it. It's a really big part of the component. I would think that the diagnostic manual would want to include that because, you know, that's the part that actually needs to be cleared in order for a narcissist to stop acting like a narcissist. But that doesn't, it's really difficult because, as I said before, they're deluded, so they don't often know that they're narcissists, so they don't seek help. And when they do, and they get help, that acts as a source of supply for them. You know, it's like, it's so difficult to make a narcissist, like, kind of turn it around. Anyway, so the other thing I wrote down is attachment disorder. So, narcissist attachment theory, I forget the guys who wrote the book Attached, but they put out this theory that everybody has a certain attachment style based on their early childhood development. So if you know, I would say like 0 to 5. They say, so the majority of people are considered secure, meaning they have a secure attachment to their parents. And this isn't a judgment on parents, you know, by the way. So if parents, you know, if you have an insecure attachment style, that doesn't mean you had bad parents. It just means for whatever reason during your development, you didn't develop a secure attachment, you know, maybe because they had to work or whatever. It's not, you know, meant to judge them. But the majority of people have secure. And then the other most common ones are avoidant and anxious. And so it's my theory, my hypothesis, that I think that narcissists and people with borderline personality disorder have a tendency to be anxious, and whereas sociopaths and psychopaths tend to be avoidant. Now, attachment disorder, I mean, a lot of people have insecure attachment styles. They can be either anxious or avoidant. Most of them are not narcissist or sociopaths. You know, most of them don't have a personality disorder, but they have an insecure attachment. But absolutely every narcissist, every single one, 100% have an insecure attachment. 100%. Now, it could be avoidant. You know, I'm not saying I'm right about that theory, but from what I've seen, narcissists are highly anxious. And the reason that they're so anxious is because, well, I mean, they've developed an anxious attachment. So they're so needy for other people. They absolutely are 100% codependent. Now, what they need other people to do is uphold their fake persona, this false sense of self, because they don't have a strong sense of self. They need other people to hold that up. So even when people are, you know, as long as you're buying into it, that's the whole thing. It's like, that's where they can even take negative attention, because as long as that person is like buying into them and taking them seriously and giving them any kind of like credence, that is what they need. So they're anxiously attached because they're so afraid to lose it. They're so afraid. They have this overriding fear. Nobody likes to be rejected or abandoned, but narcissists fear this with as the fear of the devil, you know. So, yeah, so that's pretty much what I would say the DSM is missing. I mean, they're missing a few other things. There's quite a few characteristics that are very unique to narcissists that aren't listed here, but I'm not going to get into all of those because I think the core of what this disorder is lies within the attachment disorder and the addiction. And then the behavior that is most damaging is that sense of entitlement and the lack of empathy. This is what causes them to do horrible, horrible things to people and not give a shit. You know, they only care if it affects them. Truly, you know, and it's really sad because, you know, the people that, when you're dealing with one, you kind of expect a human response and, you know, and you're just kind of left hanging with it without one. It fucking sucks, you know. Anyway, so yeah, so I'm going to keep on doing these videos on narcissism and just keep on going with it. So hopefully you guys like them. I have some ideas that I want to throw out there. I want to do one on narcissist and empathy, empaths, and the truth movement. So I think the next video is going to be about the truth of empaths and describe what an empath is. Because narcissists and empaths are kind of the polar opposite of one another, and yet they tend to be constantly magnetly drawn to one another. So that's an important topic. And then let me know if there's anything you guys want to hear about. You want to hear about like other people in industry, or other industries and corporations, the government, etc., as describing as a malignant narcissist, or if you have specific questions or anything that you've dealt with if you're a victim of narcissistic abuse, because it's very common. Most everybody has met a narcissist in their lives, even if it's in your family, your parents, one or more parent could be a narcissist, a child could be a narcissist, a sibling could be a narcissist. It's really anywhere. Your boss, a lot of people experience narcissistic abuse at work. And, believe you me, it can mess with your mind, because they're really gifted at. Another thing they don't describe is the fact that every single narcissist is a gifted manipulator. And they gaslight people and, try and make you think you're crazy when they're actually the ones that are messed up. But that's another thing that they do, is projective identification. So all the horrible, miserable things that they're doing, they try to make you identify with that. And empathetic people pick that up pretty easily. So I want to get more into that and talk about that, because that's also a big part of being an empath. Anything else that you guys want to know about, or if you want to share your experiences in the comments, as long as you feel comfortable doing so, please do. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, peace, truth, and love, y'all.